Okay, I'm going to talk to you for a little while today about lathes, because I talk about them all. I'm using my lathe all the time, and I thought it was probably worthwhile just giving you some practical pointers about lathes. Now, I've got to confess, when I finished school, I did a fitting and turning apprenticeship and worked on a lot of lathes during that time. Then I gave it away. I never went back to the trade. I used to work with a lot of British and Scottish fitters. I don't know why that was, it just was. Some of them were extraordinarily clever, because none of these machines back then were computer driven. You know, it was all manual. You had to work it all out, and it was all in thousandths of an inch, and we made stuff. And I enjoyed doing that. And then when I got into the hobby, I thought, gee, it would be great if I had a lathe. So I found a very, I just stumbled on one day, which was a small jeweler's lathe, really. And I brought it home and tried it out and realised it was hopelessly underpowered, almost to do anything. So that was a bit of a disappointment. I made a couple of things on it, but it was just really too slow. And so I decided I'd get one bigger. And I responded to an ad in the paper, and I got this one that I'm going to show you in a minute. That will be 30 years ago. I've been in love with it. It's been a love affair ever since. It's just great. It's perfect for modelling. I did decide I was going to go for a bigger one at one point, and I bought a Hercus lathe, which needed some work, and then I sold it for what I bought it for. Honestly, this does everything I need in relation to what I want. So let me give you a bit of a show over it, and then I'm going to tell you some interesting things. Okay, so I've built my lathe into a bench, as you can see, and it's moderate size, and it sits there quite nicely. Now, what happens, of course, when you buy a second-hand lathe is you get a whole lot of stuff that comes with it. So in this little original Benson and Hedges box, I have some high-speed steel tools. You can see some of the materials. Now here's a tungsten. I'm just going to go through some of the tools that there are here, and you can see here a tungsten carbide bit that came with the tool. I never use that at all. This one that's been ground nice and round, I use that for getting a very nice smooth finish. That's a very nice tool. This is a classically designed tool, ground in a classic way. I use that practically all the time, and this tool lasts forever. On the other side, it's got a left-hand version, which I never use. Now here is my parting tool that I've ground into high-speed steel. That came with the lathe. I've just maintained it. I've had it for years and years. I use it all the time. It's great. This is a long boring bar that's useless. It's too long. This little round piece here, I use that for making grooves in pulleys. This is a good boring bar. You can see from this that it's made quite solidly, so it means that it doesn't vibrate too much at the end. It's quite strong, and it does some lovely boring. I'm very happy with it. Here's another boring bar that I never use. This is a small boring bar that I've just recently turned up. It looks a bit awkward, but it's really quite good for smaller stuff. And this is another V-shaped thing that I don't know what that's for, and I never use it. Tungsten carbide boring bar. Never used it. And I won't use it either, I would think. Just came with a lathe. Now these are center drills, and I have to say they are so important. I use them in the lathe all the time, and I use them on my drill press and the compound slide all the time. The larger ones, I bought them as a set off eBay. There's a 4mm one and a 6 and an 8mm one, I think, here. I use them all the time. Really very handy. Here's some packing, because it's very important that when you put your tools into your holder for the lathe that you have them centered perfectly. So I have different thicknesses here, and I have on the wall a quick chart, which means I can refer to which tool goes into, it needs to be packed by what to get it to the center. Now this is the drive system for the lathe. As you can see, it's a standard, I think that's a 3/4 horse motor sitting behind there, driving a pulley, driving some other pulleys, and of course I can change the speed by changing the pulleys. I'm going to let you into a big secret here. I never change the speed. I find just medium speed's good all the time. If I put something in there like an end cap, which requires, which is probably about 100 mil across, if that's the case, I'll slow it down. But other than that, I just cut everything gently anyway. This is the drive chain that drives the lead screw. And of course, it has an automatic feed. Just for your interest, I never use the automatic feed. Don't need it. And I certainly don't use screw cutting because I use dies and taps. What I do use is a 4-jaw chuck. Now this particular lathe came with this chuck and doesn't have a 3-jaw chuck, which suits me to the ground because I can do anything and everything with a 4-jaw chuck. Of course, it means that everything I put in there has to be set up with a dial indicator, which adds a little bit of time to the turning process, but not all that much. Here is the drill holder for the end. Can't remember what the name of it is. And you'll notice right down the bottom of that are a couple of screws that you can use to adjust it to center, because once again, like your tools, they have to be adjusted to center. Now this is the just winding back the lead screw here and taking off the top of the tool holder, just showing you how this works. Now the most important thing when you buy a lathe is that you make sure that this fits really nicely and there's no play in it. Of course, if there is a bit of play, you can adjust it because it might not be adjusted. The trick though is to make sure that it stays adjusted throughout the length of the bed. What I mean is, if the bed is worn directly under the chuck, which is most likely to be the case, and you tighten this up, make it all nice and neat, you won't be able to slide it back. That's a very bad sign. Also on this particular lathe, this is the slide that has the imperial measure so that I can adjust it and make nice cuts and get things accurate. Once again, the chuck and the headstock, must be no movement in that. You cannot have movement in that. Otherwise you just throw the thing away and you don't want it. Either that or you get someone to machine you some new bushes. This obviously is a nice little compound thing here. You can manually feed that and cut an angle on that, which is really very handy. I've also got this milling device that came with the lathe. How fantastic is that? The trick is though, I don't use it. I use my drill press and the compound vise system under that for everything. Faceplate, don't need it. 4-jaw chuck really does everything I need. A dog for turning, don't use it. I use that on occasion, which is a dead sensor. I think a live sensor would be better, but I just haven't used that very much and haven't needed it. That, once again, is all adjusted nicely, and of course you can tighten that down and hold that really still. So all of that is pretty good. That's got to be lined up perfectly too. Once you've got those things done, now I've got a 85mm swing on this, which really suits me down to the ground. I can get away with everything with that. And that's how it looks in total. We have the little oil tabs there, so you can drop some oil into the various components which you need to do. Just look after it like you look after anything else. And the vernier caliper is you just got to have one of these if you've got a lathe, so you can measure inside and outside as you go. And yeah, what else can I say? I'd suggest then, these, I never use them. I bought them in a rush of blood at a garage sale. Don't need them. Now, just a couple more things to say. I've talked about high-speed steel and that I use it primarily. I just grind this up in a standard grinder. You might have to learn a bit about how to use it or how to grind them properly, and you'll do that by trial and error, but there's plenty that shows you how to do that. I showed you this classically designed tool. It's actually there permanently. you can find out how to grind those, and the clearances are fairly straightforward, and once you've got one of those, honestly, you use it most of the time. So high-speed steel will work beautifully with plastic, obviously, and with brass. And what I use mostly in my work is brass. Now, tungsten carbide is really good on harder metals, but you really have to drive it, you have to get the speed up. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes with that as a hobbyist you simply don't need. I can cut stainless steel with high-speed steel. It's fine. And it's just a matter of not rushing at it, not trying to do it too quickly, and just working your way slowly. I mean, the critical things that you need to be able to do when you're working on a lathe is make something accurately, and you do that incrementally. You take cuts slowly, you just measure things as you go, you never rush anything, and if it doesn't work, you throw it away, start again. It's the best way to learn. But in fact, they're not that hard to use. So what I've done is I've been to a brass resellers, and I've just got a slab of brass. I've got a bucket full of it, all different diameters. Very seldom use something as thick as that, but I use that to make practically everything. I don't use steel because steel will rust and simply no point. And let me think. So the other thing that you need to do is you do need to get good quality drills, not only for your lathe but for your drill press. That's something that you shouldn't shirk on. The better the quality, the better you get, the less likely it's going to grab or jam in your work. That's always a problem. But I find I've also got, as you've seen, a set of multi-size drills that I can use to get practically any bore that I need. But often, not often, but sometimes you have to machine it. And if you have to machine it, you just need to go gently and quietly and get your width tested as you go. It's a lot of fun. You'll see me doing that in all the movies different times. So this one cost me around about $300 a long time ago. If you go on eBay, I think what you should do is you should just, not just eBay obviously, but if you go onto a place like that, you're looking at second-hand equipment, something fairly old. What you need to do is make sure that nothing moves, that all the bearings are good. If you don't know about that, take someone with you to do that. You don't need anything too big. And I mean, you can buy them massive things, and just don't do it. I mean, a good Hercus lathe is probably the perfect one. This is smaller than a Hercus, and I don't need anything bigger. Okay, there we go.